I've been teaching Monday morning metaphysics for a lot of years. The woman who taught me how to do the wall-to-wall book study format that I use was an amazing minister named Dr. Yvonne Smith. And when we would sit in Dr. Yvonne's living room, we always started with a namaste. And so I've continued to do that with my book group. And I thought, what a great way to start this session today. Namaste is an old Sanskrit word, which means the divine in me sees and honors and recognizes the divinity in you. In other words, wherever we look, we see the face of God. So the way we always start, I'll just read it to you. In fact, I'll read, let's do read, and you can speak it back to me session by session. Namaste. Namaste. I honor the place within us, where infinite possibilities reside. I honor the place within us of love, of light, of truth, of peace. Of love, of light, of truth, of peace. And I honor the power within us to be consciously aware. I honor the power within us to be consciously aware of the indwelling divinity in ourselves and in all humanity everywhere. Namaste. And in all humanity everywhere. Namaste. And if you wouldn't mind, just do a little namaste around the room here, acknowledge. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And namaste to all of you who are there in viewing land, even those in your PJs and probably enjoying yourselves. Honor each other. So my message today, I'm calling Life as a Labyrinth or Life in a Labyrinth. Kind of gone back and forth. I thought I might just want to call it Life is what happens when I make other plans, because that's how my week was. Or I plan, God laughs. That's another one you can use. But it was a great week. Coming out of Unity Village, Michael and I were at this beautiful retreat all week. We were there with an organization called the Affiliated New Thought Network. We were hanging out with Unity ministers and religious science ministers and divine science ministers. And, there's just a lot of flavors of the theology of New Thought. And there's a little spin of difference of flavor in each one, but essentially the core values of all of it are, the same. Same with unity, same with religious science. And so we speak that same lingo, so it's really fun. It's just like a block party of about 200 of your closest friends. So it was really fun to be there. And how many of you have been to Unity Village? So not a whole lot of you, but you can get a flavor of what it's like to go to Unity Village if you go on the website, because the website has some magnificent pictures on there. And being on the grounds, we were there the last week of September, right on the edge of October. Trees hadn't started to change yet, but we had perfect weather. And so we could go walking, we could sit outside and have lunch, and it was just beautiful. So we come back basking in all of that, and life happens, bam, we're slamming into life. We're in the middle right now of a rather formidable situation in our family where Michael and I are doing a complete gutted remodel of our entire main floor, which is requiring us to move out of our house in 2 weeks and pack the whole thing. And we've got 2 weeks to do that. And then things started to happen. We were going to have our grandchildren, Roland, who's 8, and my granddaughter, Daenerys, is 5. And they come over and they hang out with Grandma and Grandpa on Friday night, and I send them home on Saturday morning. And in the middle of the week, somebody got sick. Not the kids, the parents. So we wound up having a whole lot of grandchild time that we were not expecting. So how many of you are grandparents? It's like, it changes your life, right? So I was, I'm all ready to write my lesson. I'm excited about getting to my lesson. I'm in the, I'm basking in the ideas of Unity Village and all that. And they start happening. Roland gets up before dawn, climbs in bed, wants to talk, and when he talks really loud. So quickly now, all of a sudden, I'm getting texts back and forth between parents, and now there is going to be a play date with a child who's Roland's age, and we think it's going to be in the afternoon. Turns out it's going to be at 8:15 in the morning. And so I run in, I'm getting my shower, bad hair day. And then it's 7:15, I'm about to get my coffee. Danny comes down, she's got little furry unicorn slippers, and she says, "Grandma, can you cut the tag out of the slipper? It hurts my foot." So I open it up. It's not a tag. It's like this big Band-Aid that she'd been wearing somewhere along the line. It's now laminated on the fuzzy slipper. So there I am, 7:20, no coffee, with an X-Acto knife trying to carve this thing out of her slipper. Then we have workers coming over. We got to move the car. Roland's friend gets there. We have beds being made. We got, kids got to brush their teeth. You got to remember. Oh, and you got to feed them too. And so we're going through all this, and then on top of it, we've got to get our complete closet in the bathroom because we have plumbers coming over, and they left, and the plumbing was still leaking, and it was just like this all the way. Well, we ate dinner that night about 8:45, and guess who didn't get to her talk that day? So, the week went on, and I'm still thinking about Unity Village, and I wanted to share a little bit more of that with you. In addition to the grounds, if you go to Unity Village, they'll actually take you on a tour in Unity Village. And you can go down it's almost like going down in the catacombs. They have it's almost like a labyrinth down below with a maze of all the ways you can get around. And one of the things they also have there is a beautiful library, and you can go and look at Charles Fillmore's office, and you can look at Myrtle Fillmore's office. You can look up a daily word that's from your birth month, see the daily word of your birthday, which was really fun. And one of the really fun things we found was a picture of Reverend Kitty Benson at her graduation in her group, and that was so much fun. We looked real hard, and we thought we could just see the little twinkle of Unity in Naperville kind of perking its way out there. So anyway, back to my talk now. Here I go. It's Friday, and I'm working on my talk. Kids are finally taken care of. We've got a lot of other moving parts going on. So I started thinking about what Reverend Kitty had talked about last week, which she's been on a theme of worry. And for me, worry is a natural thing. I've worried all my life. Anybody else worried all your life? And what's ironic about worry is I used to be a safety supervisor for a grocery chain, so I got paid to worry for a living. I turned it into an art form, right? And so I would go around and worry for everyone and try to have them, keep their accidents from happening. But, little by little, if you want to develop serenity, worry is not the best way to get there. But I wanted to remind you of some of the tools that Kitty talked to us about last week. She had a little diagram that looked like a remote control, and it was all about how to change the channel. Because the beautiful thing about us is that we can change our minds, and when we change our thoughts, we change our life. We've heard this, right? And she had given us some of the tools, meaning work with our thoughts, work with gratitude and love, work with our imagination, work with feelings, work with words, and work with non-resistance. I heard a quote, Brene Brown. I imagine there's a couple of you that like Brene Brown out there. She's my shiro, but she's a shame researcher, if you don't know who she is, and she's phenomenal. And one of her quotes is, "You are afraid of surrender because you don't want to lose control. Ooh. But you never had control. All you had was anxiety." Can you relate to that? All the trying to control. And, I tied that in because of that one quality that Kitty put on the channel changer on her dial, that non-resistance. And I think that's one of the things that you can really take into the tool of a labyrinth, is the process of moving into non-resistance. Now, I want to know, out of show of hands, how many of you have actually experienced walking on a labyrinth? Okay, quite a few of you. Well, here's what I discovered. We have a lot of them in DuPage County and around the area, which I didn't know. We have a labyrinth over in Wheaton. It's a beautiful labyrinth. In fact, we're going to start showing some labyrinths. Let's show what labyrinth is, that slide. This is a labyrinth. It's a walking meditation path. And the thing about them, do you know that they are over 4,000 years old? And people don't really know what the origin was. Originally, they weren't necessarily for the sake of meditation for divinity's sake. They were actually a little more nefarious than that, which we won't go into. But the term labyrinth really means a unicursal maze. And the thing about a labyrinth is there's only one way in. You walk the path, you enter the center, and then there's only one way out, which is the way you came in, and then you walk out of the labyrinth. So it isn't like a maze, like a corn maze, or one where you can't figure out where you are. It's just that one way in and one way out. And more than anything now, they've come to be known as really beautiful, contemplative, peaceful walking paths as meditation of getting to the center. Some of you may know a good friend of mine, Martha Creek. And one of the things Martha Creek uses is her part of her little catchphrases. She says, go within or go without. She also says, I'm in a hurry for peace. And I think I am too. I need some peace. But part of the way we do get to the peace is by doing spiritual practices. And labyrinths are really beautiful spiritual practices. When you walk a labyrinth, you're walking for the purpose of the divinity, experiencing the divinity, and anything that might be in the way of that divinity is partly what you can take into the labyrinth with you, into the center, or you can even intentionally almost leave it at the gateway to the opening of the labyrinth and figure, if I need to get that worry, I'll pick it up on my way out. But a lot of people use a labyrinth to walk into themselves, to go within, and to contemplate the unity of God. Eric Butterworth, this is the book we're reading in the Monday Morning Metaphysics, and writer Eric Butterworth says, God is not in you in the same sense that a raisin is in a bun. That is not unity. God is in you as the ocean is in a wave. And of course, we've had that great song that Kim Char has written, I'm not just a drop in the ocean, I'm all the ocean in a drop. And it goes on, he says, the wave is nothing more or less than the ocean expressing as a wave. And then he goes on, he says, we come to a place where there is no one to bow down to and worship, not even within ourselves. And as we get a greater perspective of our relation to the universe, there is no one to pray to. Hear that, there is no one to pray to, only a universal flow to get into, a spiritual energy to pray from. And the role of prayer is the projection by our words and feelings of this divine flow, this wonderful spiritual energy that goes forth to accomplish that for which it is sent. This is the science of prayer. So let's go ahead and flip to the slide where they were making the beautiful labyrinth. This labyrinth is now fully complete. It hasn't yet been opened fully to the public, but this is where they were laying it out. It's actually based on the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth that was built in 1200. And it's one of the largest labyrinths that this labyrinth company had ever built. You can turn to the next one. And every single one of these beautiful bricks, the thousands of those bricks that make up that labyrinth were all cut and carved and made by hand. Just seeing that alone just filled me with so much reverence and awe. You go to the next slide. Our group had the privilege of being one of the first official groups to be able to set foot on the labyrinth, which is not even open to the public yet. One of our members of our group has as one of her spiritual practices that she does, she comes out to our Unity Village retreat and she lays down hundreds of little tea candles all over the labyrinth. And this was happening on a moon. It was a moonless night, wasn't it? We could see Jupiter. Was that right? They think beautiful. It was just beautiful night, just perfect weather, perfect conditions. Let's show the walking path. And there we were. They were playing like Gregorian chants while we were out there walking. There's just nothing like being able to incorporate the kinetic movement and all the different ways that you can contemplate life and contemplate what's all around you, the nature of yourself. there's any way, there are myriad ways that you can walk in a labyrinth. There is absolutely no one way to do it. And again, it's just, you know from the start that you're going to walk in and you follow along. And there's actually like 4 quadrants in a labyrinth, if you really look at it, and then it's encircled by the outer ring. And you can do all different sorts of mind meditations. In fact, if you go on the Unity website, they actually show some of them. And they say that you can use the 4 quadrants for different ways to think about what you're thinking about. My thing was, I just love the idea that first we go within. You know, too often in our lives when we're trying to solve something and we are trying to figure it out, that's when I always know I'm in the ego. I'm trying to figure things out, make things happen. In this, it's about that surrender, let go, let mind flow, and await the divine download. So you can even walk into a labyrinth and desire a vision. You know, what is my highest idea of my life? You could pose a question. What is the question for which my life is the answer? And then walk the labyrinth. But when you walk in, you get into it, and it's wonderful to walk it alone, but it's even, in my opinion, better walking it with other people, because your mind, at least my mind, when it encounters other people, I start thinking them in terms of myself and comparing them to myself. In a labyrinth, you cannot tell which direction you are going. You can't tell which direction they're going. You can't tell how far into it you are. You can't tell how far into it they are. But it will often feel a little bit like life. Have you ever had that experience where you perceive people are ahead of you? They're ahead of you with money. They're ahead of you with jobs. They're ahead of you with acquirements. They're ahead of you in love. They're ahead of you in every area. It's called comparing. Anybody compare? Yeah. One of my teachers says comparing is despairing. And ironically, though, we all do it. And in the labyrinth, it's interesting when you're walking the labyrinth, for some people, and this was my experience, for some people, it'll kind of kick up like a comparative feeling, like they're ahead of me. How do they get ahead of me? Because the wonderful thing about walking in the labyrinth is you walk in and you walk through, and then all of a sudden you're almost at the center. You think you've just made it to the center because you've got a plan. You want to be in the center. And all of a sudden, you take the turn, and now it's taking you all the way out to the very outer ring of the labyrinth. And then you turn, and now it's taking you all the way around the labyrinth again. And you go, I'm never going to get to the center. I'm so far away. And you start to think about, what's it going to take for me to get to the center? All these little subtle things can be observed when you're walking in a labyrinth. Because all those little subtle things are what's going on for us day after day, hour after hour, the little things that get in our way. What we begin to see walking a labyrinth in meditation is we look outward. All of a sudden you'll realize you're completely out of present time. Anybody ever have that experience when you're meditating? And so then you pull your mind back. And then you realize, oh, I could pay attention to these beautifully carved bricks and just observe it, and then get in the awe of that. And all of a sudden I realize I'm looking down. I haven't looked up for about 3 minutes, and all of a sudden I look up and there's the sky above, and there's Jupiter. And then I look around and there's my friends, people I know. And when you meet people on the labyrinth, because there's only one way in and one way out, what happens is the people coming out are going to encounter the people coming in. So how we greet each other is interesting. You know, do we step off to the side? Do we stand our ground, let them step off to the side? You know, and little subtle things like that come out in the most remarkable ways when we're on that labyrinth. What I love is there seem to be more and more of us as we walk that labyrinth, that when we would encounter, we would actually do the Namaste to each other. And then with love and peace, move around each other and move on. Another thing I was aware of when I'm walking the labyrinth is if somebody was in front of me walking slower than I wanted to walk. Reminds me of the expressway. The labyrinth of an expressway. How many times do we feel like people are in the way of our good? They should be going faster. Why aren't they going faster? Or we get somebody that's coming up behind us, and you can find, in the labyrinth, kind of feel the body coming up behind you. Now they're tailgating me in the labyrinth. And now what do? Do I move over? Do I let them go around me? And it's just interesting the way the mind makes things up. But there's also just that sense of being like, wow, we're all on this path together. We go within. We talk about that a lot in Unity. We go within. What are we going within to find? Going within to find ourselves, to find our connection, to realize that we belong in the unity. I recently read something that says, don't go through life looking for evidence that you don't belong, because you will always find it. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to turn that around and say, walk through life looking for evidence that you belong, you will find it. And I think that's what unity is all about. We belong together here. You know, we're all different. We have different personalities. We may not agree on everything. We have different political ideas. We have different ways of lifestyle. Everything. We're built different. We talk differently. But there's such a sense of unity and such a sense of the delight of the variety. So part of this is how you walk a labyrinth. You know, do you have an already accepted idea about life? Do you have an intention? Do you have a purpose? And if I have as a purpose that I want to have joy in my life, then when I walk the labyrinth, I'll be joyful. The way I was watching people walk was really interesting. There was one minister who's a new minister, and she's just landed a church, and she's really excited, and she was dancing through the labyrinth. There were other people that I know, their hearts were hurting, and things had happened in their lives, or they're going through some kind of medical things, or some kind of challenges with relationships or whatever, and they were very slow in gait and heads down. So, you know, depending on time of life is how we're going to always be walking in these labyrinths. So we walk and walk and walk, and it's only one path. It reminded me in the book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman's book. Some of you may have read it. It's a story about the athlete Dan Millman and we're not sure if he was a fictitious guide, but he has a guide named Socrates who helps him through a lot of his enlightenment. And there's a point where Dan asks Socrates, well, you know, there's all these paths. What path should I take? And Socrates says to Dan, all paths lead nowhere. And Dan says, well, how do I choose which one I'm going to walk? And Socrates says, you choose the one that has the most heart. So it's like that heart, the intelligent organ. And you know, if you take the word nowhere and you break it apart, it's now here. No matter where we go, nowhere, it is now here. Because at the level of consciousness, there isn't matter, energy, space, and time. There just is a continuum of who we are. And who we are is who we are. But the beautiful thing is, if I catch myself having less than desirable ways of being, where I'm irritable or I'm feeling frustrated or worry, because, you know, worry is a learned behavior. You know, if worry is a learned behavior, we can unlearn that behavior. But it takes work. You know, we got to kind of crowbar that out and find new evidence of that. But by being able to look at ideas that we have about ourselves that may be self-limiting, the most wonderful thing about our beautiful minds is we can change them. You know, Byron Katie is one of my favorite go-tos when it comes to asking and inquiring into truth. Byron Katie was a person who did a lot of work in her own life and had some real dismal failures in her life and was very, very depressed, and then she had an epiphany. And she wrote the book called Loving What Is, and she created a whole body of easy-to-use work called The Work. And in the work, it's about asking questions. It's about inquiring into our own minds. Is this true? This idea that you have that's limiting, is it really true? And then she asks you the question, well, you know, who would you be without that thought? And then she'll say, no, she says, who are you when you're thinking that thought? And then the last question is, who would you be without that thought? Michael always says if you could just have a little plug in the neck and you could just drain out all that negative stuff and just put the cork back in, you'd be all set. But we can't quite do it that way. But in the labyrinth, we go from realizing nowhere is no here. Now here. We are here now. And the point of power is always in the present moment. So I love this labyrinth idea. And what I wanted to share with you is you can walk it in any different way you want. If you are in a, and you can walk a labyrinth in your mind. You don't have to walk one physically. You can actually visualize a labyrinth and see yourself walking in it with a question. Deepak Chopra wrote, for example, when you're wondering if you can accept and trust the choices you're making, particularly the bigger ones, and you might be vacillating and stuck. He said, if you obsess over whether you're making a right decision, you're basically assuming that the universe will reward you for one thing and punish you for the other. The universe has no fixed agenda. Once you make any decision, it works around that decision. There is no right or wrong, only a series of possibilities that shift with each thought, feeling, and action that you experience. I'm going to show another labyrinth before we wrap up here. This is a beautiful labyrinth that's over at the Marion Joy Rehab facility in right off of Roosevelt Road in Wheaton. The woman who intuited this labyrinth was a friend of mine. She was the CEO of the place at the time. And they had built a new wing next to a parking lot. And when Kathleen stood and looked at this big space, she goes, that's a labyrinth. And she contacted the labyrinth company and brought them in, and they built this amazing labyrinth. I always said she was a building intuitive, because what happens, and you can walk this, it's free, you can go there. You can go to the one in Theosophical Society, has one that we walked yesterday, and it was fabulous. But if you go walk this particular labyrinth, when you walk around in it, all of a sudden you realize that you can see yourself reflected all the way around in all those windows. And when you get right to the beautiful center and you speak, your voice comes from above your head. It's just fantastic. So that's a really powerful one that you can always go to and work with. So there's so much I could tell you about the labyrinth, so many myriad things you can take into it. But you can do that in your own contemplation in terms of the questions that you give to yourself. But here's the thing. The path of the labyrinth takes you within, into the heart of your mind and your heart. And once you are done there and you're ready to come out, what you do is you bring out what you just got out of yourself, and then you give it out into the world. That's Namaste. That's the ability to really do the connecting and realize that mind, body, spirit is really a truism. And when you come out on the other side of the labyrinth and you step away from it, you feel like you're taking it with you. And it reminded me of the T.S. Eliot quote that says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So we go within to go without. And that's life in the labyrinth. So let's take that into some meditation. How about that? There it is. Isn't that beautiful? Just picture yourself there, and let's go on a labyrinth walk. Oh, as we do here so often, we take a deep breath. Now take another deep breath. And picture yourself at the opening of the labyrinth. And you're preparing to take your first step. This is a mindful moment. And it's yours to choose how you want to walk. Do you want to just be present to the present? and walk with that awareness. Do you want to take something into the labyrinth that you are ready to let go of, lay down, put aside, for it no longer fits with who you are now? For you can carry that into the labyrinth with intention. And as you walk, realize that you are about to put it down. You can walk in silence. You can look at your own feet, feel the gait of your own body. You can contemplate your position in space. You can walk the labyrinth with gratitude in your heart, letting your heart well with thanksgiving for everything that is good and that you can bring into mind now as you walk, and feel that altitude of gratitude. If your heart is heavy, you walk in surrender. You can walk the path, allowing yourself to perceive support and be willing to accept it. If you need solitude, you'll find it on that labyrinth. If you need comfort, you will find it in the labyrinth. For as Master Teacher Jesus taught us, seek and you shall find. Knock, it shall be open. Ask, and it shall be given. So perhaps you are walking the labyrinth, seeking and asking. If you are in a quandary of indecision about something meaningful, you'll find guidance in the labyrinth. In an almost palpable way, you can feel how the universe realigns with a decision you make. And even scientists have told us that when the wave becomes the particle, when we make our decision, the universe goes to work manifesting our desire. There is no punitiveness or no in the labyrinth. Now see yourself in the center. Some labyrinths have benches you can sit down and rest. And then when you're ready, you stand. And with mindful devotion, you begin the path out. walking through, I end my meditation the way we began our service. This is Namaste. I honor that place within us where the entire universe resides. I honor that place within us of love, of light, of truth, and of peace. And I honor and recognize the power within us to be consciously aware of the indwelling divinity right where we are and right where everyone is. As we step off the labyrinth, we feel that sense of realization. God is, and I am. And with a grateful heart, we surrender these words into law and let them go. And so it is. Amen.